Why is this much more appealing than this? We can talk about that.
Here at Tattoo Tabletop, we have a lot of fun, so be sure to like, share, subscribe. It's all completely free and it helps me out. And if you really want to help me out, come join our Patreon. Link is in the description where you can come post and talk about your favorite minis. Now back to the video.
Welcome to Tattoo Tabletop. My name is James, and today we are talking about chaos in Warhammer, specifically the differences and reasons behind chaos, and kind of a bit more of why does chaos feel more appealing in the 41st and the 30K millennium as opposed to fantasy. Now, this is mainly an opinion piece. Obviously, I'll provide what little bits of information I have, but you can form your own opinion. I'm just presenting an argument because the one thing I found very interesting with myself is, as you know from my background and from many other videos, I have a ton of armies. It's easier for me when people ask me, "Oh, what armies do you play or what armies do you have?" to literally just pull up the app and then just be like, I got that one, I got that one, I got that one, I don't have that one, I got that one, I got that one. It's just quicker for me because I do find something appealing in almost all armies, almost all of them being the operative word. Now, one army that I did end up having for a hot second and then admittedly sold was Slaves to Darkness. I got the one of the launch boxes for the edition as a giveaway for one of my local events. And I was like, wow, okay, the one army I don't have, but maybe I could get into it because at the time I had Night Lords, I had Chaos Space Marines, so I thought, yeah, Slaves to Darkness, this should appeal to me, right? Wrong. For some reason, as I was going through, I was trying to find something to pull me in, just grab me and pull me in to the chaos of Age of Sigmar. I mean, I remember when Chaos of Fantasy had existed. I remember I played some Chaos campaigns on Total War Warhammer. Maybe there's something there for me. And then I realized there wasn't. The only thing that really pulled me into the Chaos side for specifically for Age of Sigmar was mostly the Dark Oath, and we currently know how the Dark Oath rules are doing. They definitely need their own book, they need their own faction because they serve the Chaos gods, but they call them a different name and they don't completely know they're serving Chaos. All they know is they slice their hand, they make an oath, and if they fulfill it, they are rewarded for it. So, eh, I don't know. It's up for debate. And obviously, they do hate Order. They do hate Sigmar specifically because he left them behind when the Age of Chaos was coming in. So I want to talk about the main differences, the reasons I think that this is doing so much better than this, and we'll formulate an argument around that. Number one, why is this doing better than the other counterpart? I think a lot of it does have to do with lore. Now, when we're talking about lore, we're more or less specifically talking about the extent of the lore. When we look at the Chaos Space Marines here, and even when you look at the back here, you see the Black Legion fighting Ultramarines, you see Abaddon the Despoiler, you have this idea of kind of what this looks like. I mean, even when you look at the artwork is distinguishably different, but the biggest thing here is the story. There is so much more to Chaos Space Marines than there are to the Slaves to Darkness. So you have certain sub factions of the Slaves to Darkness, but you don't have Night Lords, Alpha Legion. You don't have Word Bearers. You don't have the Black Legion, or like in 30K, Sons of Horus. You don't have these compelling stories and or characters and or factions that make them so distinguishably different, even though they're coming from the same models. I think that's something that makes them very unique. Now, when you do look at Slaves to Darkness models, obviously there's plenty of people who paint plenty of different schemes for them. Obviously, there's a wider expanse of them, but I will say this as well, because even when you look at the Slaves of Darkness Chosen or Chaos Warriors, etc., when they are painted a different way, it's usually to indicate which chaos god they might serve, red, blue, green, pink, purple, etc. And I find that very interesting because, I mean, again, when we're looking at the world of Warhammer 40,000, you're looking at more specifically, there are the World Eaters, which are the Khorne dedicated legion. You have the Thousand Sons, you have the Death Guard, you have the Emperor's Children, and they all have their own characters and story, and there's so much more to them there. I mean, you do have Blades of Khorne, and you do have, your Zeech and stuff like that, but something about it just doesn't quite hit the same. I'm not sure what it is, and I think that there's something to be said for it. But again, we're gonna try and leave the Chaos God part out of it, and we'll focus more specifically on just the generic, slaves to darkness, and why for some reason this isn't just doing that. But I do think that lore does have a massive part to do with it, because you do have a wider scope of it, which is not completely Age of Sigmar's fault, right? It is a newer property. It's been out for a good while now, but also it hasn't been out to the full extent that Warhammer 40,000 or 30K has, for that matter, to be able to tell those stories, or to even just have the Black Library novels to back it up. Also, for a brief second, I also want to talk about their main big bad. So, what do I mean by the main big bad? So, obviously, again, in Warhammer 40,000, you have Abaddon, the Despoiler, famous character from Warhammer 30K. He survives through to 40K. He comes to hate his father, Horus, the main arch traitor, and thinks he did it all wrong and hated the politicking and everything. He's come to be written a little bit better. People tend to think, oh yeah, this is the Black Crusades were like rewritten to be clever plans and blah blah blah. I'm for past videos, I'm a fan of the new way they've written Abaddon. I think he's been great. I actually really like the way they've fleshed him out a little bit more. He feels a little bit more approachable. And even from his brief foray into, for example, the Night Lords omnibus, the Night Lords, specifically Soul Hunter, when he shows up to Talos and talks about a bunch of different things to him and shows him the temptations of the Chaos Gods to his other Claw members, it kind of painted him in a much more interesting light. There was something to be said for that. And not to mention that one of my personal favorite Arcs of Omen campaign books from the previous edition was Abaddon's opening right at the beginning. I thought it was incredible. I really love the dialogue he has with himself, where he is taking power from the Chaos Gods while trying not to end in service to them. And it's a very interesting back and forth. And that's, of course, how he meets Vashtor, who wants to become the fifth Chaos God, blah, 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 blah. Either way, that is Abaddon's legacy. Now, you'd think maybe, oh, Age of Sigmar, it doesn't have quite the same ring, the same extent as the 40K one. That's where you'd be wrong, because of course, for the Slaves of Darkness, we had Archaon the Ever Chosen on Dorgar. Now, Archaon actually does have a good bit of lore because he's from the old world. He is the Ever Chosen, the one who brought about, or at least helped bring about, the end times. So he has lore from fantasy brought over into Age of Sigmar, but he really doesn't seem to do a lot. Right now, he appears to just be sitting at the 8 points, which is the focal part where Chaos currently is, specifically where there's a lot of realm gates, and he's just kind of, holding down the fort. There were some implications from some of the other books recently implying that there was a bigger plan that he's enacting. He worked through the Skaven to bring about the Vermin Doom. He helped them plant their Warpstone. There's a bunch of things there for that, but otherwise, for the most part, he's just been sitting on his armored butt and really doesn't seem to be doing much. I think this does play a good role as into why we don't see a ton of appeal on the Slaves Darkness side, or at least for myself, I don't see it, because Abaddon's out here. He's doing work. He's doing stuff. He's doing the chaos things. This idiot, he's just kind of sitting around on his butt, and doing this thing when he was originally sold as a warrior, as the Ever Chosen, the guy who went and claimed these things and conquered these places. He seems to be just sitting around a whole lot, and it's a little problematic for me. So I do think, again, and that's another notch in 40K's direction. So one of the last pieces as to why I think the 40K side of Chaos is doing better. Now, there is a fair amount of crossover, right? So demons are one of the few things that exist in 40K and in Age of Sigmar, and they're the exact same. You have blue and pink horrors from each. You have bloodletters and stuff like that. You have nurglings, yada yada yada. They exist in both realms, which is great because it allows certain miniature painters and hobbyists to be able to buy chaos demons and feel comfortable knowing that in some way, shape, or form they can use them on either side of either game. But you also have things like Be'lakor. Be'lakor is a very primarily he's in Age of Sigmar a lot right now, especially. He's a primary antagonist of the Black Talon series, which could use a bigger budget and a little bit better writing, but we're not here talking about that. That's a different thing. He's in there, and he's also in 40K. One of his most predominant escapades recently in 40K, which was one of my favorites, is again in the Arcs of Omen when Vashtor sieged the Rock, where the chapter ship, to put ship in quotes because it's basically a giant piece of Caliban that the Dark Angels have stayed on, and they have specific relics from the Dark Age of technology. Specifically, they have the Chakalka engine, which is its own little thing, and this is something Vashtor wanted. He showed up, he started sieging the Rock. The Dark Angels are fighting it off, and then out of nowhere comes an incursion of demons, and it's Be'lakor. And Be'lakor starts fighting Vashtor because if anybody's going to be the fifth Chaos God, it's going to be Be'lakor. So you can just imagine this cool, fun little like WWE, just like, oh, Vashtor's coming in with this. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, it's Be'lakor with a steel chair. And it is hilarious. When I was reading that, I absolutely loved it. There's a cool piece of artwork where Be'lakor is fighting Vashtor and the Dark Angels are just kind of like, shoot them both? Yeah, let's go with that. So I found it very, very interesting. And again, so that's something that lives in both realms. But what's another distinguishing factor? Well, we saw it at the beginning of this video. If you're an eagle-eyed viewer, look at the design language here. The design of this sort of cover, this sketchy, grotesque, like sharp contrasted armor, this invokes chaos. This is orange, black, and gold. There's really, I think, something to be said for the design of it. When you look at a lot of these models, there are some cool ones. You do have, Archaon, and you do have Abraxia, and she is a very cool character herself with the Varangard and the Chosen and everything like that. But I think there is something to be said for the design language of the general slaves to darkness. When you're looking at them, there's just something that's not leaping out and screaming chaos as opposed to looking at some of the models here. Or again, another piece of artwork. This is the fight between Vashtor and Be'lakor at the Rock. It's intense. There's a color palette here. There's so much more to this that really I think just helps sell this faction as a whole. Like, this makes you want to play chaos. This makes you want to play the bad guys. You look at this display of miniatures here and you're just immediately transported to this, corrupt evil faction. And also because some of them are traitors by choice, some of them are traitors of warp, and there's so much more to it. I think the design language has a lot to say. When we're talking about hobbyists and painting chaos, we always joke about chaos trim specifically because it does exist in 40K and it does exist in Age of Sigmar. In my humble opinion, this does not make me want to paint chaos trim. This makes me actually want to suffer through and do some of it and try and figure out a way around it because I find that it's just a much more appealing thing. I do have a lot more Chaos Space Marines, and again, I sold my slaves to darkness because the one part of that faction that actually appealed to me was the Dark Oath, and their rules are just rough and they really kind of just need their own book. I will say chaos, when we're talking about the wider chaos of Age of Sigmar, you do have Skaven, you do have now the Hellsmiths of Hashut, which I do think is a really cool army. I probably will jump on it at some point myself, but the Chaos God specific factions for Age of Sigmar don't appeal to me. The World Eaters absolutely appeal to me in the 40K side of things. Again, we've talked about this. I'm a Midwest boy. Corn all the way. That one, it actually does appeal to me, but I do think that there is something to be said about the art and the design language. When you're looking at these two books, if you are taking somebody who knows absolutely nothing about Warhammer, either Age of Sigmar or 40K, and you present them with these two covers, I think you'll find most of the time people will pick this one because of its color palette, because of its design. I think there is something to be said for that as well. So that would be point number three for me. So those are just 3 points from me as to why I think the Warhammer 40K Chaos is just better than the Age of Sigmar one. But let me know down in the comments down below. Are you an Age of Sigmar Chaos player? Are you a 40K Chaos player? Are you just a flat out Chaos player and you play them in both? Let me know down in the comments down below. And of course, if you feel like to like, share, subscribe, do that whole thing. I've got a lot of fun videos planned. I'm gonna work on a few different things this year. This is the variety show, so we're gonna have plenty coming down the line. Hopefully, once Age of Sigmar gets a few more updates, we'll be working on some of those projects. I'm still going to keep chucking away on my Sons of Horus. There's tons and tons and tons for me to do. I will never have a shortage of things to paint and to do. So until next time, though, do me a favor, whether you worship Khorne, Zeech, Nurgle, or Slanesh, just go paint something.